Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge and Company. I was 10 years old when World War II started, and even though I remember it well, Lorraine Diehl's delicious book, Over Here, New York City During World War II, brought back many more memories. And it also reminds me of the differences between that war and the wars we've had since. So I'm anxious to talk to Lorraine about it. And first, hello.
Hello. Very nice to be here.
And first, let's talk about the book before we get into the whole question of war.
That. Sure.
I just enjoyed it so much. I remember New York when I was younger during the war. The interesting thing about the war, though, is I don't remember, or my memories is, I don't remember pre-Pearl Harbor. I mean, I knew in Germany that there were problems. I don't think I ever knew that ships were being torpedoed or something was happening at the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
And you have a recording, I think, of Bob Hope and Dolores Hope.
I do. What happened is, this is 1939, September 1939, and actually Bob Hope and his beautiful wife Dolores are on the Queen Mary, and it's the Queen Mary's last commercial trip as a luxury liner. She was coming to New York and she was going to be converted to a troop ship. Well, in the midst of this wonderful trip, England declared war on Germany.
I personally was on the Queen Mary crossing from Southampton to New York when this was announced. And I went down into the salon on this Sunday morning, and everybody on that boat was in the salon praying and crying. And I was supposed to do a ship's concert. And I told the captain, I said, there's no way I can do a ship's concert with the people in this condition. He said, it might be the best time in the world to do it. And I went on and did that show that night. And I opened up with a very broad joke about the woman that was standing on the corner in London with her dress up over her hat. And a fella said, lady, you're getting your legs all wet. She says, I don't care. My legs are 50 years old, but the hat's brand new. And they laughed at that. They seemed to want the broad humor. They wanted something to make them forget what had just happened. World War II had begun.
And once that happened, all the U-boats, Hitler's U-boats were, they were given fair game. They were told, you can go and hit whatever you want. So there they are in this U-boat infested ocean, and
they're on the Queen Mary.
They're on the Queen Mary, and everyone is terrified. They said, we're going to be a target. What's going to happen? So he gave a little talk, and I think we're going to hear a little bit of it now. It's very nice. So very interesting.
So as soon as they declared war, that's when they started. The U-boats were just allowed to go, and they came up as close as long. I mean, they came up to our shore.
Up until then, they were in the Atlantic because they were hitting England left and right, and they were very, very potent, very, very powerful. But Hitler deliberately kept them away from us because he didn't want us to get involved in the war. But once the war was declared, at least between Germany and England, he felt, okay, there's a little bit more leeway here. I can let these guys come and do what they have to do. They didn't actually come to us until after Pearl Harbor. That's when we had those wolf packs, and they literally came almost right up to our shores. I mean, Coney Island beaches were closed off. I spoke to people who lived in Asbury Park, New Jersey, and they were not allowed to go on the beaches because things would wash up on the beaches, sometimes a body part, because they'd look out at the horizon and they would see these explosions, and they knew that was a ship being blown to smithereens, because these are the ships that were all feeding England with
cargo
fuels.
Ships. Yeah. But they weren't American ships.
They were our they were our ships that were actually going over to England.
Oh, this is during the war, right?
Yeah, this is before. Actually,
after Pearl Harbor.
Right. And so these were ships that were literally feeding England its supplies, its cargo, its fuel, and it was pretty devastating. I mean, and then they got so brazen, they literally would come to the shores in the middle of the day. I mean, it was a really scary time.
I do remember the Bund, and I remember Father Coughlin and all the Nazi sympathizers, and Yorkville, which had a terrible reputation, the East 86th Street and the East 80s, right? So you do that in the book. I mean, they're wonderful pictures and stories about what happened there.
Yeah, I wanted to do a necklace. I wanted to kind of put the whole thing together so that, because I felt everyone knows a little bit about this, a little bit about that, like you were saying,
Yeah.
but no one really gets the whole
Whole
picture.
picture.
And so when I started to do the research and I saw what was going on in Yorkville, I thought, whoa, this was a
to
lot
have
more
it.
potent than I
Yeah,
thought it was,
yeah.
you know?
So that was there. I know as I grew up, even after the war, we didn't really go to Yorkville all that much.
I know.
It was really funny.
Yeah.
And then the war came here.
Yes.
And that's what fascinated me, how quickly they adjusted to having a war. You know, I think, as you say in the book, everybody remembers where they were when President
Right.
Kennedy was assassinated.
Right.
And I think all of us remember where we were when Pearl Harbor happened
Yes,
that Sunday
absolutely,
afternoon.
absolutely.
And then I always remember Roosevelt and the Day of Infamy. I loved
Oh,
that.
that speech. That was the
terrific,
following
right.
day, yeah.
Yeah. The city mobilized.
Yes, it did. I think, you know, as William Styron said, this was the last just war. It was such an easy, it was an easy war to mobilize yourself for, because Hitler made himself a very easy target. I mean, it didn't take too much. We did have isolationists, but they quickly fell into line once we were attacked. And once we were attacked by Japan, I mean, it's sort of like 9/11.
Yeah.
Once that happened, it resonated, and everyone realized we really had to do this. Because up until then, you know, Roosevelt had a hard time selling the war.
Right, and then we knew about what was happening to
Yeah.
Jews, although I don't think we totally knew the
Not
whole
to the
extent,
not
the
at all.
concentration camps.
Not at all.
Poland and
not
different
that
places.
early.
Yeah.
Exactly. But they knew that there was trouble. But don't forget, it was a sticky situation here, because, as I was saying to you, we had anti-Semitism here. So even
Yeah.
when they had an airlift to sort of kinder transport for the British children, when they did that, that was sort of given such great publicity, and here they are, and look at what we're doing for them, and isn't this wonderful? But when the German Jews were sending their children over, they had to do it word of mouth, because they didn't trust the
general public.
The general public, yeah. They felt, you know, the quotas are getting tighter and tighter and tighter. So if we start making a big thing about this, we're going to
Coming in,
really,
yeah.
So they had
But
to
we
literally.
did. We grew up in an age, at least I did, of very acute anti-Semitism. It was right along
Yeah.
with all the other antis. There were quotas in college admissions,
Right.
even after the war.
You're right.
And I
Definitely.
remember going on a car trip with my parents, and my mother would say, "Oh, we can't stay there. There are no Jews allowed."
The word
there."
restricted was just part of your language. I mean, you could get on the Fifth Avenue bus and see a sign about the new Jackson Heights garden community that had been built, and right on that sign on the bus it said a restricted community. I mean, you'd see ads in the
Yeah.
paper saying Christians only apply. It was extraordinary.
It's amazing.
Yeah,
isn't it?
amazing. So with all of the burdens of coming over here and fleeing Hitler, there was this to contend with. And of course, also the German Jews who were coming over happened to be speaking German.
Yeah.
So, you know, people were looking
Well,
at
it's
them.
suspicious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But anyway, the city did pull together.
The city
LaGuardia
pulled
was the
together.
mayor.
Yes. Oh, and he was wonderful. He was so colorful and so vibrant, and he was a bit of a chicken little. He thought, oh my God, the Japanese have bombed Pearl Harbor. Any day now they're going to bomb us. And even though his chief naval officer, Andrew, said, no, they're not going to come here, he was very intent on mobilizing the city even before the war. He wanted the city ready.
Yeah.
And people got behind him.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a very
So,
strong
I
character.
mean, the mechanics, if you think about it, of getting all the air raid sirens mounted, and then all the legislation and the process for rationing. Because what I remember about it was the street lights were painted half black, I
Half
think.
black,
Right.
yes.
So just the lower part was
Yes,
that.
so that's where the light was.
The headlights on cars were also half
Yes.
black. There were much fewer cars because it was very hard to get gas, right?
Exactly. There were fewer cars anyway, but then there were even fewer cars with the gas.
I
no
remember we used to
question.
play ball on 89th Street, and if a car came to park, we'd say, please park down further. And later on, it was hard to get tires and everything else, so people
Yeah.
weren't driving around.
Not at all. You know, they had the great rubber drives, the scrap metal drives, because it all went to the war effort.
And then, of course, we had a draft, which is a major difference.
Yes, that's a huge difference.
But even though we had a draft, there was
Yeah.
this great sense of patriotism.
yeah. I
So
think
people enlisted.
they enlisted. In fact, I have a picture in the book of the of a bus that the U.S. Navy had, because they realized that the recruitment centers couldn't process all the people who were enlisting. So they had a big bus at Washington Square Park so that they could process them right through on this bus.
There were so many people standing on line to get in, too,
Yeah,
right?
and the women, you know, the riveters, our riveting Rosies, a lot of the times those women wanted to get these jobs at the Brooklyn Navy Yard and at Grumman and Republic. I mean, they wanted to work and they needed to work, but they also wanted to serve. And that's what they all told me. They said, you know, our husbands are serving, they're doing their job. We needed to do our job.
Everybody had a role.
Everybody
If it
had a
was rolling
role.
bandages, knitting,
Yes.
collecting scrap. We used to collect all the silver from the cigarette packages, right?
Yeah.
And make balls. And then in school, because I was a kid, we got these round discs that I now think of as pieces of ivory, but I'm sure they weren't.
I think they were Bakelite.
Bakelite.
That's what I think.
I can't
because
find
I have
mine.
one.
I really wanted
do have one.
Yeah, and it had our name.
Yes.
And what did it have? A number, an address,
I
or
think
something?
it had your date of birth, and it had I think it has date of birth, your name, and I think your address. Because they were there in case, and they told the children, they gave the children a different story from what I understand, but in case there was an attack.
I wasn't really scared. That's what I don't remember. I wasn't scared. I did want to be a Navy nurse. Dying to be a Navy nurse. I remember reading books and paying attention to it. It was great fun. We had air raid drills all the time.
Yeah.
My father had a cousin who was an air raid warden, and he was very officious, and he hated him.
Oh, wow.
But they would organize. They'd have
Yeah.
meetings, and they'd do things. And then when there was an air raid, were they all alerted before? I guess they must. I don't know if they were or not. Somebody decided to.
No, I think they knew when they were going to have air raids, and then the air raid wardens would go around and make sure that
and put that light out there, and they'd blow the whistle. And
Exactly.
Everybody had dark curtains and dark shades.
Right.
And then we had rationing. I found my
I love
family's ration books, and my mother had them in a thing that says the
That's
Myers.
amazing. I've never seen this little packet.
And then all of these ration books and the stamps that are all for different kinds of food. I remember standing online on the corner of 91st Street and Broadway. There was a subway station there then for chicken. And the line would go around
the block.
And
And
she would
the
send me
sidewalks
to
would be
stand online.
littered with the ration coupons.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
It's interesting.
But what was interesting about this war, as you said, is that everybody wanted to do something.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was clear that, you know, we were on the side of right, at least it seemed to most people. There were a few dissenters, but for the most part, there was this great sense of patriotism, and you know, it was a simpler time too.
Yeah.
I think things were processed differently. I think the way news was given to us, there was a delay, so it was just a very different mindset. I mean, everybody I interviewed felt very, very strongly about the reason that they had to defend. They felt that they were defending freedom, and the word freedom that was much more concrete than it is now. Now it's just hijacked by these people who feel that if they give you anything, you're going to take your freedom away. And I mean, it's hard to compute, but this was a case where you had a keen sense of what was going on in Europe. And as I said, after Pearl Harbor, we were being attacked, and we had to defend ourselves.
We had the newsreel films and the movies.
Yeah, Pathé News.
Right, and then people followed battles, but it was, as you said, the day after, 2 days after.
Exactly. So
I mean,
it was
we
all
still
processed.
didn't have connections to Europe. It wasn't it sort of like Morse code or stuff?
I think so.
It-
And in
it
fact,
was
even at one point, the zipper, the lights on the zipper had to be turned
at
off
the Times
because
building.
of because of the dim out.
Right.
The dim out took a while, but once we got the dim out, a lot got dimmed.
Yeah, it was a very different. So now we've had wars since then. We had the Korean War.
Right.
I think that had the draft still.
Yeah, it did, as did Vietnam.
Yeah, and then we had Vietnam, and now we have this.
Yeah.
But they weren't wars that had a clear reason of why we were there.
Exactly.
To try to explain about the whatever parallel it was in Korea.
Right, and what did that have to do with us, really? I mean,
Right.
I don't know how many people got that. I don't think I did. And Vietnam, well, of course, that was that last bastion. If we don't get the communists now, they're going to be crawling up the East River and, you know, coming and getting us or whatever. This kind of unspoken, well, not so much unspoken, but this terrible fear. It was the domino theory, and it was a theory.
Yeah.
And the irony is, you would go to Vietnam now, and
Now it's a tourist spot.
it's a tourist spot, and those kids don't even, the kids who are living there don't even remember, have no memory of it. So you're saying to yourself, whoa, why did we do
had
that?
50,000 dead there.
Yeah, for what?
During the Second World War, everybody had a blue star if you had somebody in the army.
Right.
I remember the first gold star was this beautiful young man that lived next door to us.
Yeah.
Just beautiful blue eyes and everything. And all of a sudden, one
He was
day,
gone.
you hear he's killed.
Yeah.
So in the Second World War, they all volunteered. The only people who really objected, I think, other than some German sympathizers, were conscientious objectors who just didn't want
Well,
war.
in the beginning, we did have isolationists,
Yeah.
and Charles Lindbergh was a
Right.
major isolationist because he did not like FDR, didn't
But
like
once
Jews.
the war was declared,
Then he was on our side.
Yeah.
I mean, even in Yorkville became the when we were talking about these scrap metal drives. Well, what LaGuardia did, which was very clever, he pitted one. He had made it a competition amongst the boroughs who could have the biggest mountain of scrap. So Brooklyn had Ebbets Field, this huge mountain, and Manhattan had a few of them. They had one in the middle of Times Square. But then apparently one of the biggest ones within the borough of Manhattan was in Yorkville. So they were
that's
trying
interesting.
very hard to show their patriotism. Because the point about Yorkville, and I didn't want to paint too dark a picture,
Right.
because most of the people who were taken by Hitler in the beginning and were seduced by this were German aliens. They weren't so much German Americans. A number of German Americans did, but a number of German Americans were really embarrassed by all of this. I mean, they considered themselves American first and German second, so they weren't swept into this net. Although I say to myself, when you look at that Madison Square Garden rally, they had 20,000 Nazi sympathizers showing up, and I
That
said,
was
where
before
did
the
they?
war, though.
That was before the
Yeah.
war, but I'm saying,
Yeah.
where did they come from? That was a lot of people.
Right.
So it's a kind of strange thing, but we were talking about the patriotism.
And it didn't. The objections weren't that visible until Vietnam.
Right. Oh, definitely. And I tell you, that's what I wanted to say to you. We talked about, and I will live through Vietnam and how contentious it was and whatever. When I went to Normandy, I felt that was one of the few places I felt I really had to go. That was a pilgrimage. And when I looked at that vast acreage of graves, I said to myself, there but for you, I mean, it's because of you that I'm here walking this city, my city. So, I felt a very strong connection, and that I think most people feel that. I don't think you can feel
But
that.
I don't
anything else.
understand how people, and I still don't understand it in this war. So now we have this war,
Yeah.
which is almost an invisible war.
Right.
Basically because we don't have a draft, right?
Yes, definitely.
It's a war where you either you enlist for many reasons.
Yes.
One of you're patriotic and think this is important, or one that you don't know what you're going to do and you want an education
Exactly.
and you need a job, or you belong to the National Guards to make
Right.
more money, and people are there.
Yeah.
The
But it's
difference-
somebody else's.
Right. It's
people.
and I mean, it's just incredible. I make a point every day of looking to read about the people who've been killed, and
Yeah.
it's reported.
Yeah.
But also, we have a lot of people of color fighting in that war.
Yes.
And now come back to World War II and the way that black people were treated in that
Oh,
war.
well, they were segregated. I mean,
That
it was
was amazing.
awful. And I talk in the book about the riots that went on in the middle of Times Square for about 3 days, where black soldiers would come in with the other soldiers on their leave, but they never felt comfortable in Times Square. They'd feel much better off going to Harlem because that's where they would be accepted. So, and even when that riot was eventually quelled,
How did the riot start?
there was a miscommunication. Some woman was arrested. She was loitering in a hotel or something. She had a bad reputation, and this other man, she was black, and if she was arrested by a white policeman, and someone misinterpreted it and said she was being accosted by this man and by the cop, and rumor turned to more rumor, and before you knew it, everybody had their own version of the story, and the story was, it didn't even matter what the story was. What it was is it was the little match in the dry straw.
But and the riot lasted for a couple of days.
A couple of days, yeah. But even when it was over, nothing was really handled. LaGuardia, we weren't enlightened enough.
No,
it just wasn't a time.
Totally, we're not.
Exactly.
And you have some pictures here of Times Square, and you sit and look at them, and you can't find a dark face. I mean,
they couldn't. If they went to Radio City, all of the Rockettes were all white. They had to be. They could not be black. So there was, and look at the sea. You're right. Every now and then you'd see one, but it was
very hard.
Exactly.
So the nation really has undergone lots of changes.
Lots of changes, yes, and since then.
It's
absolutely
the irony of where we are now. I mean, to have a war where people. The other thing that I don't understand is the elected officials were reluctant to go to war, weren't they? I mean, there was a reluctance. A pullback with Roosevelt wanting to go to war.
Oh, yes, exactly. Yes, there was a lot of, in fact, one of the reasons we had the Lend-Lease policy was his way of getting around that and aiding Britain, and he felt very but you could understand where they would say, where people of good heart and good conscience would look and say, well, but that's going on over there. And don't forget, we were in World War I at the tail end of it, but you could see where people might say, but that's not our war. Why are we fighting it? At least before you saw the horrors of what was going on in Germany. We didn't see that in the beginning.
So they were reluctant.
Yeah.
Why do you think recently with Iraq, the president was able to convince the Congress ahead of the people that that's where we had to go?
I don't know.
What has happened between then and now?
I can't answer that. I think that they become wars of if we don't do it, something is going to happen, and it's almost like becomes a very bloody chess game that they're playing. If we don't move here, which is what Afghanistan is like. If you don't move here and do this now, then this is going to happen, and it all looks like it makes sense on a chessboard, but when you're putting men in line.
Men and women.
And women, yes, absolutely.
That's another major change.
That's a major change.
To explain to people now the general support for this war and the inclusion of everybody in the country is a very difficult thing.
I know, but we were just a different people. And as I said, that war, I guess the best way to describe it is, when you think about Pearl Harbor, is to compare it on some level to 9/11. And you see we're being hit, we're being invaded, we're being destroyed. I mean, the same sort of assault.
An intrusion on our property.
Yes, exactly. And so everybody becomes, I remember the day after that, everybody was walking around with flag pins, and I had one, and I'm not inclined, but
did you speak to any people who lost children in this book, or they would not be alive, would they?
No, I didn't. I didn't come across anyone who. I came across people who knew of people who lost them, but I hadn't come across anybody who lost anyone.
I have always been amazed at how people are able to sleep when they know that a part of their family is in war.
Well, look at Mrs. Sullivan with the 5 Sullivan boys, and they were all in the same outfit, I think, and it was because she lost all 5 of them. That they then had the Sullivan law, meaning you couldn't have, if you had brothers and sisters in the war, they couldn't be in the same theater.
And that still exists?
I think it does. I don't know if you need to worry about it at this point, but I think.
But did we paid attention? It was the way everybody was galvanized, all the stars. Nowadays, the stars organized to oppose the war.
Yeah, well, exactly.
In those days,
exactly.
They had what?
The bonds, the tremendous bond drives
that were
in the
financed
city.
by the public, basically.
Yes,
the war, to a large degree, the war was financed by selling war bonds.
And these are people who came out of the Depression, don't forget. I mean, it's not
didn't have a lot of money.
No, didn't have a lot of money, but everybody gave to bonds. And what was interesting to me is how all of our big department stores got involved in all of this. When I was looking for photographs, I came across Saks Fifth Avenue and I. Miller. Remember I. Miller?
Shoes,
Those beautiful shoes, right? Well, they had war bond drives in conjunction with the release of the movie Spellbound. And there were these gorgeous photographs of beautiful transcendent looking, Ingrid Bergman and Gregory Peck, and there they were, their pictures bigger than life in Saks Fifth Avenue and in I. Miller, and if you bought a bond or whatever, they would give you tickets to the show or whatever. So there was all that.
So, and now, and in those days, the movies were so embarrassingly propaganda.
A lot of them were, definitely.
You know, and the music was so to get you all stirred up.
In fact, one of the things I wanted to mention to you is I've got an exhibit at the Brooklyn Public Library that's going on right now. It's a
lot
show,
of the material from the book.
Exactly. But what I'll be doing in April, as of April 13th, I'm doing a 6-part. I'm going to be curating a movie series of all the movies that most of them were in the book.
Oh, good.
That have to do with New York City during the war.
And where will they be shown?
They'll be shown at the Brooklyn Public Library.
So the people should contact the Brooklyn Library to find out the latest
Yes, or
information.
go on their website and just look for it.
Do you know what that is? I don't know what that is.
BPL, I think, .com. I think it's
.org.
They could, .org maybe, yeah.
Yeah, or they can Google Brooklyn Library and look at new exhibitions.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. We have come to the end of our half hour. It goes so quickly. But it was an experience that actually I hope we never have to live through again.
I do too.
And if only we could have a world without wars, right?
Absolutely. And if only we could have the same generosity of spirit collectively that we had then. I mean, I thought we were a wonderful people then, and we could use a little bit of their example today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there are any people you'd like to hear and topics you'd like us to explore, please let me know. You can write to me at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or you can go to the website at cuny.tv and click on Contact Us. I look forward to hearing from you.